Today, India is the fourth largest trading partner for Africa with a bilateral trade of about 84 billion US dollars and cumulative investments for more than 75 billion US dollars.
In 2023, a quiet deal shook the global defense order. Algeria, long tied to Moscow's weapons and Paris's colonial shadow, began rolling out the red carpet for New Delhi. What looked like an unlikely partnership quickly revealed itself to be a strategic pivot. Algeria was choosing India over Russia and France. This story isn't just about Algeria and India. It's about Africa's shifting alliances, the crumbling influence of old empires, and the rise of new powers who are rewriting the rules of global order. For decades, Algeria's military was Russia's showcase in Africa. From Sukhoi fighter jets to T-90 tanks, Algeria was one of the top importers of Russian arms. Moscow didn't just sell weapons, it trained Algerian officers, repaired their equipment, and shaped their military doctrine. But the Ukraine war broke that supply chain. Spare parts stalled, deliveries were delayed, and Western sanctions made Algeria nervous. Suddenly, the country's reliance on Moscow looked less like a shield and more like a shackle. Enter India. A country once seen as a buyer of weapons is now emerging as a builder. From BrahMos supersonic missiles to stealth frigates, India's defense industry is quietly becoming a global player. For Algeria, this was perfect timing. Here was a rising power offering weapons, training, and tech without colonial baggage and without Western strings, and crucially, without the sanctions problems Russia faced. But India's entrance into Algeria wasn't just about weapons. It was about history, resentment, and France. France's history in Algeria is bloody. Over 1 million Algerians died during the brutal War of Independence from 1954 to 1962. Even today, French influence lingers in Algeria's economy, language, and politics, but it's not welcomed. Algeria wants freedom from France's shadow, but every time Paris lectures Algiers on human rights, democracy, or migration, it feels like colonial arrogance all over again. So when India stepped in, Algeria saw more than a defense partner. It saw a chance to work with a nation that had never colonized Africa, a nation with its own anti-colonial struggle against Britain. That shared history mattered. It meant Algeria could modernize its military without bending the knee to its old master. And it meant sending a clear message to Paris: we don't need you anymore. Geography makes Algeria impossible to ignore. It has Africa's largest landmass, vast energy reserves, and a Mediterranean coastline that stares directly at Europe. For decades, France and the EU counted on Algeria's gas exports, but Algeria is tired of being treated as just a supplier. By partnering with India, it's diversifying its allies and securing new technology that makes it harder for Europe to pressure it. India, for its part, gains something priceless, a strategic foothold in the Mediterranean. Until now, India's influence in Africa was largely in the east in countries like Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique. But Algeria opens a western gateway, connecting India not just to Africa, but also to southern Europe and the Middle East. In a single move, India positioned itself as a Mediterranean player, and that alarms both NATO and the EU. This India-Algeria partnership is bigger than just one country. Across Africa, governments are watching closely. Why? Because it offers a third way. For decades, African nations felt trapped, either rely on Western powers like France and the US, or depend on Russia and China. But now, India is presenting itself as an alternative, one that shares Africa's colonial scars, but also has the technology and capital to help. If India's partnership with Algeria succeeds, it could set a precedent. Imagine India supplying drones to Nigeria, missiles to Egypt, or frigates to South Africa. Imagine India helping African nations build their own defense industries, just as it is doing with Algeria. For Africa, this means more bargaining power. For the West, it means losing its monopoly on influence. And for Russia, it's another sign that its grip on Africa is slipping. In Washington, Paris, and Brussels, policymakers are beginning to whisper about India's quiet rise in Africa. On one hand, the West wants India as a counterweight to China. On the other, it fears India's independence. If India partners with Algeria, it undermines French influence. In North Africa, if India builds weapons for Algeria, it reduces Russia's leverage. And if India gains military access to the Mediterranean, it creates a new player in NATO's backyard. This is why the Algeria-India partnership is so disruptive. It doesn't just shift alliances in Africa. It reshapes the entire strategic map of the Mediterranean. To truly understand why India is suddenly in Algeria, you need to step back and look at the bigger picture. For decades, Africa was seen as a chessboard for the West, Russia, and more recently, China. But while these giants played their game, India was quietly building relationships that looked less like control and more like cooperation. Think about it. In East Africa, India's diaspora is massive. Millions of Indian-origin citizens in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda have been shaping business and trade for generations. In West Africa, India is a leading buyer of oil from Nigeria, and across the continent, Indian companies have invested heavily in telecom, medicine, and IT services, but defense? That was missing. Until now, by stepping into Algeria's defense sector, India isn't just selling weapons. It is signaling that it is ready to compete in the one space that truly defines global power, military partnerships. This is India's long game, not to colonize, not to dominate, but to become Africa's go-to partner in a multipolar world. Algeria's pivot to India isn't happening in a vacuum. Inside Algeria, politics are tense. The government faces pressure from unemployment, youth frustration, and an economy still too reliant on oil and gas. On the streets, protests have erupted in recent years demanding reform, demanding accountability. For the leadership, strengthening the military is not just about protecting borders. It's about maintaining domestic legitimacy. A strong army means a strong state, but buying weapons from Russia comes with risks. Moscow's war in Ukraine has drained its own stockpiles, and sanctions make payments complicated. Buying from France would be political suicide. No Algerian leader could survive the backlash of relying on its former colonizer for arms. That left two options: China or India. China is already everywhere in Algeria, building ports, highways, and railways. But Algeria doesn't want to swap one dependency for another. China is seen as too dominant, too willing to extract without truly respecting sovereignty. India, by contrast, feels safer. A partner without overwhelming dominance. A partner Algeria can negotiate with. That timing, Algeria's domestic need for independence and strength made New Delhi's offer irresistible. Here's something most analysts are missing. The Algeria-India partnership isn't just about weapons. It's also about resources. Algeria is sitting on more than just oil and gas. It also has untapped reserves of rare earth minerals, the very materials needed for electric vehicles, batteries, and advanced electronics. India, which is racing to expand its CV industry and reduce its reliance on Chinese imports, sees Algeria as a potential goldmine. In return, Algeria sees India as a market not just for its energy, but also for its future mineral exports. This creates a loop. India supplies Algeria with weapons and technology. Algeria supplies India with energy and rare minerals. Both free themselves, little by little, from Western and Chinese pressure. It's not just defense, it's economic survival and future-proofing. At the heart of this story is a single truth. Algeria wants freedom. Freedom from Moscow's failing defense industry. Freedom from Paris's colonial shadow. And freedom from Western lectures. India offered that freedom. Not just weapons, but respect. Not just a supplier, but a partner. And that's why Algeria chose India over Russia and France. The world may not fully grasp it yet, but this alliance signals something much bigger. The rise of a new geopolitical order where Africa and Asia stand side by side, no longer dictated to by the West or chained to Moscow. Algeria and India may have just drawn the first lines of a new map, one that redraws power in the 21st century. And as the Mediterranean heats up, the question is no longer why Algeria chose India. The real question is, who's next?